This is a production of Cornell University.
So today my topic is called Everything's Coming Up Dahlias, talking about how not just I, but a bunch of other people in Extension are starting to create a system to support the cut flower industry in New York State. So do you have any cut flower growers? I can't. Okay. So how many people have bought flowers at a farmer's market? That's a good start. How are in a flower CSA? Well, there's at least 3 that I know of. Which one are you in? Sorry, I got your mouth. Which one are you in? Family of Posies, okay.
Well, I used to live in Seattle.
Okay, and so they have them there as well. Yeah, so I'm also in Family of Posies. How about roadside stands? And how about Dun-U-Pick? Okay, and how about events? So this picture is to show that flowers, even just growing fields of sunflowers is a big deal for weddings now. And flowers, getting your local flowers for weddings is a big deal too. So we're starting to see, if you've done any of those things, you've seen that there's a lot of cut flowers available that didn't used to be there. Used to be florists and maybe grocery stores, but we're making progress and where they're getting sold. So, all right, now let's see. So in New York State, the wholesale value of cut flower sales increased 1.5 times between 2020 to 2021. That's pretty dramatic. And now that's only looking at operations of 100,000 or more. And I will guarantee you that we have a lot of small cut flower farms that are not up at 100,000 in terms of what they're bringing in a year. So all the numbers that I can find are definitely going to be underestimates. If you look at the 2019 census, it said there were 122 operations with 2.7 million in sales. If you look at the Association of Specially Cut Flower Growers, that a lot of growers are members, but not all, you can find about 130 in New York. So there's at least that many, let's say. One of the questions, if you want to work with them, is how do you find them and what do they need? So just looking at what's been done so far. Oh, sorry, this is from one of the cut flower growers. Actually had on their website, New York Flower Farms, it's called. So this is looking at the major distribution methods. For the ones that we're looking at, we have a lot that are selling to the individual consumer. So that could be a CSA or farmer's market or roadside stand. There are some that are selling direct to florists. So you can sometimes get local flowers at your florist. And there are some that are wholesaling and maybe often in combination with selling direct and possibly with selling to florists. One of the things that's amazing when you talk to cut flower growers is how many different things they're doing to sell their flowers. And often they cycle through a variety of different, sorry, something just happened over there. They cycle through a variety of different marketing systems to find out the one that works best for them with their production, how big they want to be, and so forth. One of the things that I will say about cut flower growers is they tend to be pretty entrepreneurial. And I'm not sure whether that's by necessity or just that's the people that start out trying to do cut flowers. So the floriculture industry is definitely paying attention. You can find lots of articles about growing cut flowers in the trade journals. Growers aren't waiting for us to get information to them. So they're starting, this is a Facebook page for Central New York flower growers or upstate New York flower growers, where there's a lot of conversation back and forth about not just what's for sale or prices or how to sell or does somebody have something, but pest management information and some other production information as well. And now you can become grown in New York State, grown and certified for cut flowers, and not all of those crops came in at the same time. So this is a more recent one. I would like to find out how many are on this list, but I haven't figured out how to do that yet. So working with cut flower growers in New York State is not completely new. Anyone who's been in this department for a while knows that. But if you look at cooperative extension, they've been doing some programming, mostly usually on a one-off basis, often very regional, and it may depend on if they have growers asking them questions or if they have some background information. So Russ Welser, for example, in Ontario County grew peonies. So he had background information, so he knew the cut flower growers and he did some programming for them. We only have about 5 counties in the state that actually have educators who have commercial horticulture as their specific stated responsibility. But that doesn't mean those are the only extension educators who are doing things like this. They all do things sort of its duties as assigned or as you get questions.
Does commercial horticulture mean
horticulture, or does it mean
It means not,
flower related?
no, it means cut flower could be floriculture, greenhouse floriculture, Christmas trees, any of those things, but it's not consumer horticulture, which is master gardeners and
it's
those
not
things.
apples and vegetables.
It tends not to be fruit or vegetables.
Okay, so it's kind of
Depends though,
floriculture more so.
kind of, yeah. I mean, if you can consider a Christmas tree a floriculture crop and nursery and other things. So yes, thank you. That's a great question. And so then there has been some occasional statewide programming at the Empire State Producers Expo. It's been done a couple of times, but nothing too consistent. Now, Dr. Ween, who was here and also picked up cut flowers. I don't think anyone told him to. I think he just picked it up as a potential population to work with, and did great research on cultivar evaluation, cultural practices, high tunnel production. And you can still find his research, which is all archived on the High Tunnels webpage. The one thing about doing cultivar evaluation is, of course, cultivars keep changing. So while that information is great, it may not have the newest cultivars, but other things, the production information is all valuable still. And then we have related research. So both Bill and Neil have done things that relate to cut flowers. Bill, I'm trying to sign up another place for you to use your bulb machine. And so it is, and bulbs are becoming one of the major cut flowers that we're seeing, also with some winter production. And then there's people that are doing pest management and ornamentals. So Dan Gilrain, Marjorie Daughtry, both on Long Island, John Sanderson here on campus, and Andy Senesac down on Long Island. Both Andy and John have sort of retired, but luckily they'll still answer when we ask them questions and appear for things. So that's a good thing, because we're starting to run out of people to ask questions, unfortunately. And then back in 2017, Lily Calderwood was the extension educator for the Capital Area Extension team. And she had so many calls on cut flowers that she decided to put together an annual cut flower conference. So that conference has been running since 2017. It's the longest running cut flower conference that we have in the state. And it's actually managed to go through 3 educators. So Lily started it, then Lindsay Christensen carried it on, and Jing Jing Yin is now doing it. And that's a regional program of 5 counties, but the conference is open to anyone. It's gone online in the last few years, which means it can reach some additional people than it did before. And then Small Farms has an online cut flower production class that they started in 2021. I co-teach it with Hannah Volpe, who runs Foxy Flora around Trumansburg. And so in 3 years, we're in the middle of, I'm teaching the 4th one tonight. We've had 235 students, and that's not just New York State, that's international. But that's a goodly number coming in through just that one point, just through the Small Farm. So they have good advertising, but still it's a good number coming in. And we have people that wish we would make an advanced level of it also. Haven't done that yet. So we do it's advertised to be sort of 0 to 3 years in cut flowers. We get some people who've had more, but because they're all at different levels, it's an interesting method of teaching where you're trying to not bore the ones who know stuff and keep the ones who are just getting started from having their heads blow up. So it is really information overload, because we're only doing it in 6 1.5-hour sessions and trying to cover all of not just pest management, but all of cut flower production. So from my observation of the people that are coming to that class and also going to other events, they get into the business, cut flower growers get into the business from the widest variety of backgrounds you can imagine. We've got bankers, we've got tech people, we've got people who are growing some other kind of crop, maybe vegetables or dairy farms, where they're adding cut flowers to their production. People who have no concept of how to grow anything because they've not really done it before, and people who have lots of experience. And it doesn't mean that any of those people can't be successful, because we find people from all of those starting points who are currently successful in the state. And so that's kind of a fun group to work with, because they bring different things to the mix. And one of the things we're always trying to do in something like this class is to have them talk to each other. So that if you've got information, and you may well have more information than I have, then let's share it. Let's make sure that everybody gets it and has a chance to share that. So this is actually a meme that Amara Dunn made up for us when we were establishing the habitat for beneficial insects, but I have a feeling it's also true for cut flower growers. it looks like they're beautiful flowers. All you have to do is put seeds in the ground and you have beautiful flowers. But you always forget that there's weeding and there's whether your soil's doing what it's supposed to do and what insects come in. So that's often true that they start out thinking, okay, this is going to be easy. I saw cut flowers at the farmer's market and I've grown a few cut flowers in my yard. And so production is going to be just like that. It's not always, but sometimes. So just based on that, that's sort of the past history of what's been going on in New York State with information for cut flower growers. But then starting in 2021, I got a call from Dana Havis, who was in Cortland CCE, Cornell Community Extension. Sorry, CCE is, I can't put Cortland and community in there, is the Cornell Cooperative Extension, CCE. Well, I'll probably say CCE a bunch of times. But anyway, so out of Cortland, and she was getting so many questions. She was actually a fiber person. That's her background, was in fiber. But she said, I'm getting so many questions. And before Lindsay Christensen left the Capital District, she told everybody, apparently, if you have any questions on cut flowers, call Betsy, even though Betsy didn't know anything about cut flowers, but was interested. So we came up with sort of a mission of what we'd like to do, what the issue is, the fact that there's not much background for cut flower growers in the state, and could we put something together that would help them? So we actually did, based on a listserv that we have, you'll see pop up later, we actually did some questions on grower needs and educator needs. And the educator needs kind of look like we need everything. We don't have enough to do for anything. We need the industry, we need speakers, we need programming, we need all of it. And the growers come across, have needed almost all of it as well. Weed management, how to plant schedules, how to price things is a huge aspect, how to use high tunnels, and then soil fertility. So there's a lot of places that information could go in, and also a lot of people who are looking for information to help fill those gaps. So this is sort of the initial group that started talking. So Sharon Bachman is in Erie County, Caroline is in Yates County, I believe. Russ Walser's in Ontario County, Jing Jing is for the Capital District, Carla Crims in Delaware, and Lindsay Pasho is in, I don't remember, one of the northeastern counties. And so actually both Lindsay and Russ have grown cut flowers, so they come in with some background information, which is helpful. But most of the other people are just getting questions, and so are interested in trying to put something together that works to help support them in the questions they're getting. And actually, this group has now created a cut flower program work team, which makes sense if you're a faculty member, maybe, and probably doesn't make sense at all if you're a student. Program work teams are groupings of faculty and extension faculty who are interested in a particular topic. So this is now sort of just gives it a certain amount of formality for the university. So the first thing that we did, Dana and I, was put together this listserv and just sort of send out information. Who's interested? We could do it through the class a little bit. This is an old picture, but it does show you at least that we have people on the listserv from all around the state, as well as outside of the state. And the biggest point for having a listserv is, how do we find and connect growers and educators? That's what we're looking for. And it is an interesting system in that it is definitely not, hi, we know what's going on and we're here to tell you how to do things. It is much more we're looking for help. Can you help us do what needs to be done so that we can get this information out to a broader range of growers? So anyone can post on it. It's not wildly used at the moment, but it does get used somewhat. It probably needs some organization. And every once in a while, if I'm doing what I should be, I'll post a question, but I usually can get some responses back, which is nice to know that people are actually reading. And then we also created a web page, which is at blogs.cornell.edu/cutflowers. And so that's another place of gathering information and posting it in one place so people can find things. And then again, this should be something where we're getting more two-way information, but it's not there yet. But then looking at just the programming that's going on based on the fact that there are people that were interested, it's definitely expanding. So this is a risk management for cut flower growers grant that Carla Krim got, and she put on a free series of webinars in 2022 and 2023, looking at risk, but risk in a broad sense. So you can see there's IPM, there's crop planning, there's climate smart farming, there's season extension, all sorts of topics that were in her series. And well, this is just an example of, she also had not just specialists talking about things, but growers. So this is Fran Parrish, who her operation is over in Western New York, and she does an excellent job at putting on presentations and gathering information from the point of view of a grower, which is always nice to have. It's one thing for me to talk about IPM, but I'm not trying to make money doing it. So having a grower's perspective on it is also nice. And then that's difficult to read in the back, I'm sure, but it's just a list of the different speakers that they had in the Capital District Cut Flower Conference for 2023. It was online then. It's also going to be online in 2024. I think it's probably going to stay online forever. But again, quite a range of topics, and bringing in both growers and faculty from Cornell and potentially other places as well. There's somebody from the University of Utah. They did the first cut flower session at the Catskill Regional Ag Conference, and they're going to do that again in 2024. Again, mixing speakers from a variety of different places. And then Long Island also added a cut flower session to their ag forum. So it's definitely popping up in a lot more places. We're seeing a lot more programming. It may or may not be very organized compared from one to the next, but at least it's showing up so that the cut flower growers have something to go and listen to. This was called a cut flower intensive at Birdsong Farm. CCE Delaware has an association with this farm, and they actually put in cut flower beds to use for demonstrations and kind of as community gardens. And so they had speakers and then had people, they picked flowers for people and they had them do sort of an Iron Chef arrangement competition. This one was on the summer barbecue. So it was amazing to see what people did. There's peppers in there. There's what they did in terms of creating arrangements on that topic. And I think they enjoyed doing that. I didn't get my fingers in that one. We're also looking at getting some more on-farm programming. Growers, in my estimation, love hearing other growers talk about what they're doing, and it's a good way to get connections. And again, this was some soil health programming that Jingjing Yin put on. She's on the far right. And it's another place you can see, and it's hard maybe to tell this in the picture, but the audience in cut flower growers tends to be younger than the other audiences that I serve in terms of ornamental production. They tend to be more female, and they come in ready to roll and with lots of great ideas. And that's kind of fun to go and talk to them and they'll correct you if they think you're wrong, which is also good. So we're looking at doing some getting some funding to help support some of this. So in the Capital District, they wrote the Northeast Extension Risk Management Education Fund grant on cut flower pricing, because pricing is a huge issue. Jingjing wrote one for farm viability on cover crops in field and high tunnel for cut flower production. And we've put in an application for a CCE intern for this summer, working in cut flowers in CCE Delaware. So I'm talking really fast and we'll see where we go here. So one of the questions that I have for you is why should you care? So I can see opportunities for on-farm research because these growers are looking for information and help, and they're pretty willing to let faculty come on their farms and work on them. I see potential for positions for students, either as growers or in extension and knowing more about cut flowers. But I want to know what potential you see in the horticulture section for cut flowers. This is where I get to stare at all of you instead of you staring at me. Does anybody have any ideas? Does anybody online have any ideas? They're shy.
Is everyone using landscape fabric, Betsy? I'm
No.
curious.
So it's interesting. So because Brian's a weed scientist, he would ask a weed science a question. So some people do use landscape fabric and plant through holes in the landscape fabric. And for some of the things, I've seen dahlias on it for sure. I've seen peonies on it. Peonies tend to stay there longer. And some people don't like it because you get dirt on top of it and then you get weeds on top of it. And so they're using all sorts of different things for weed management. I have not yet heard of too many people complaining about herbicide resistant weeds in their operations. but it may just be that they haven't figured out that that's really happening yet. So there was a big debate on one of the discussions we had was on, do you use, I also say, just to throw in to kind of go with this conversation, that a lot of the growers that I talk to either want to be organic or are organic. Sometimes wanting to be organic may or may not mean that they actually know what it means to be certified organic, but they would like to not use pesticides, including herbicides, and they would like to use something else. So when you start talking about just putting down plastic mulch, the question comes up, well, should you use biodegradable or degradable plastic mulch? And most of the growers who've tried it said no, because what you end up with is a lot of pieces of plastic. You can actually remove the non-biodegradable stuff much more easily than the biodegradable stuff. But that's one of the things that seems to have popped up multiple times in terms of weed management. So I know why I'm interested. So I'll tell you why I'm interested and why I think there's potential for this. So just in terms of the IPM programming, this is my 5th presentation this year on cut flowers. So there's obviously interest, and that's not counting the class. And there's obviously people that are trying to get that programming going. It also looks to me like, as I said, the interest is in organic or no or low pesticide inputs. The understanding of pest management varies dramatically. And I don't see, through the association and other things, I don't see very much pest management information out there. So it seems like to me, it's a perfect place for me to be, that there's a need. That's where my steep learning curve comes in, because I don't necessarily know the answers, but that there's someone who's looking for the information and they're willing to work in 2 ways with me, which I enjoy. So what's different about pest management for cut flowers? The crop diversity is immense between species and cultivars. It's a combination of field and high tunnel often. They have sequential planting and long harvest periods, which I don't see in things like bedding plants in the greenhouse production, for example. The aesthetic level means, because you're selling both the flowers and the leaves often, that the pest thresholds are really low. So they need good pest management and can't tolerate very much damage. So how many other crops do you know where they would actually go back out and bag every flower bud that they're going to sell, which they do with dahlias for tarnished plant bug damage? So, and interestingly, what the grower said, oh yeah, it's not that big a problem. I don't know, it just seems like it would take an inordinate amount of time. And it's also a very high value crop. So all those things work together to mean that pest management information is really essential in my mind, and sort of fun to learn about how to do. So just in looking at the kinds of projects that I'm looking at, there's pest management strategic plan funding from the Northeast IPM Center, looking at identifying the major insect and disease pests and what the management methods currently are, so that you can use that information to determine what to do next, what research could be done next. And then some work looking at both augmentative and conservation biocontrol and cut flower beds. Conservation biocontrol means using what's already there and encouraging it. Augmentative really means going out and adding it, so you're buying commercial sources. There's very little information on that. The conservation one, there's more information on, but it's very difficult to measure. And so figuring out how to measure it is another piece. All right, I think that's the end of mine. And I maybe even came in sort of on time, or maybe too short, but whatever. It's lovely. Yes, you have a question.
Lots of questions, I'm sure. So most of the cut flowers that Americans consume come from Colombia and Ecuador, places that have a favorable climate year round and probably cheaper labor, and then airplane transportation to get to Miami. So how do New York cut flower growers differentiate themselves from those types of products?
Sometimes it's the crops they're growing. So ranunculus is a big thing for spring. And it's interesting. I was talking to a grower that's in Clifton Springs, Phelps area. And she said, well, she's not emphasizing the summer flowers anymore. She's really pushing ranunculus, and she's got high tunnels. Because at a farmer's market, which is where she sells, and also through a CSA, she said people are dying for color in the spring. So you can sell a lot of ranunculus, which are expensive. And so there's that piece of differentiating by crop, by some things that just don't ship well. there's enough of a local interest in local food and local flowers and local everything that helps, so they can promote themselves as local. It is, it's an expensive product, and it's one that's considered maybe a luxury by some people. And so that does perhaps limit the potential sales through just looking at the whole population. But, and so sometimes it's also the variety of things that you can get. But I do think there's a certain amount of it. It's like, it's nice to go to a farmer's market and walk out with a bunch of flowers in your hands. And so I think there's some of that, I think, is just people's interest in that whole local purchasing and going and just doing the whole sort of almost agritourism of local production. Yep.
Are you developing these resources? Are there many things you can pull from like established resources in neighboring states, or are there not robust markets in neighboring states, so much more so than New York?
That's a great question. And one of the things that this original talk went to be giving it in Pennsylvania, because they're trying to do the same thing. So it's not that there are none, and there are some states that have a lot. California has quite a lot. And some states have most states have more than we do. But so between actually talking to you, not falling over the table and not staying with a light in my eye. But so we can find some, but there doesn't seem to be like, here's one good place to go find this. And then some things are regionally different. So if you're talking about producing ranunculus in New York, it's different than if you're talking about producing ranunculus in California. And so we need some of that as well, updating things to make them relate here. Yep.
That question might jive with one that's showing up in the chat as well. Any research on the possibility of using cut flower crops, researching as potential beneficial insect habitat that you could crop along with other crops? And farmers may be reluctant to give up space to beneficial insect habitat or labor, but if you break even, make a little money on it, the two can go together.
So I've actually been working on installing beneficial habitat that's not cut flowers necessarily and we've got a plot in Christmas trees at the moment to see if you can get the benefits of that beneficial habitat on the insect pests in the Christmas trees. And you're right, that takes up land. And so it's a little bit hard to do that. And I agree that if you could do it and cut it and sell it, then you've got an advantage where it's not just wasted land. It's also additional labor, and some of these crops are pretty high labor. Some things that people do are like start with sunflowers, because you can seed in a row of sunflowers. They're pretty low maintenance in terms of getting them where you want them. They're not the highest value, but people like them. And they'll still give you some of those environmental benefits of bringing in beneficials. And so potentially then also seeing, but then the question is, can you measure the effect of those beneficials on your other crop is a hard piece. But, yes, it definitely can be done. And the thing is always going to be balancing, if you're taking time away from your main crop, you need something that's relatively low labor and relatively high value per unit area just to break even. Did I cover the one that they asked me? Yeah, so that kind of covers that concept of co-cropping. And there are people that are starting, who have been growing vegetables, are starting to put cut flowers in, especially if they market in the same ways. It's a fairly obvious connection, I think. Sorry, Bill.
So a perfect example, not of that, but of co-cropping, I guess, the bulb planter and planting, you pick sorts of things like daffodils in turf grass. There's no weeding, there's no problem. And I think it's finally starting to catch on, because there's an importer here in New York who brought in 6 machines this fall.
Wow.
And I know they sold 3 of them so far. So.
And it's an interesting thing because
it's finally starting to come along.
U-pick is like one of the things where you'd have to be careful that people don't go in and trash your plants when they're doing U-pick. But with tulips, you actually want them to pull the bulbs out. They can pull the whole bulb out. So if they take the plant and they don't actually cut it, they pull the whole bulb out. That's actually a good thing, because tulips are grown as an annual for cut flowers, definitely. Maybe even daffodils, less so, but.
Well, yeah, they would be perennials.
But they tend not to give you as big flowers the second generation, the second year around and so forth, sometimes. anyway, but the way that people feel about bulbs, they often plant them as annuals. Yep.
It's interesting to hear about how the industry's growing over New York State and how people are coming in from a variety of different backgrounds. I was wondering, did you get a feel for like why the industry's been growing so much, and with people coming in from so many different backgrounds, are they all coming in for the same reasons? When you talk to these people, well, what do you find about why they're so interested in growing cut flowers?
One of the things is they're like, oh, I'm so sick of a desk job. I've heard that many, many times. And so again, it kind of goes to Neil's question of like, so you can buy flowers in the grocery store, you can buy flowers at a florist. Why should you start growing your own? Because of this interest in local, and because I think people go to farmers markets and see roadside stands and hear about you and CSAs and UPICs. They're like, well, I could do that. And so it is interesting. I don't know another industry where they come from like everywhere. And, you know, just the concept of, I don't want to work on a desk anymore. I want to be out in the dirt, which I appreciate, but it's like, okay, but it's kind of like, it doesn't. And also maybe the thing with cut flowers is you can start kind of small and just grow a few rows of things and sell them at a roadside stand without too much infrastructure, and therefore you can kind of get into it that way. It's very interesting to see how people adapt too. Once they get in, they think they're going to do these things and they end up doing those things sometimes too. Someone else had a question. Yep.
Yeah, so I'm currently a grad student studying cut flowers. I'm really interested in the local cut flower production market. So I was just wondering if you think that there might be opportunities for careers in cut flower extension.
I think so, because no, there's looks like a huge gap. So yes, I do think so. It is, you know, one of the things, because I think one of the pieces that needs to fit in there is identifying the number of growers in any given area. As I said, with Lily Calderwood, she came in to do, she was doing floriculture, but not cut flowers, but there were so many questions that she started adding that. I think if we actually looked at the industry and started documenting where these cut flower growers are, there would be, you know, it would be worthwhile for an extension office to say, we need somebody who has this background and this information. And I think there's also potential positions. I actually know the first, maybe not the first, I know someone who's actually a commercial scout for cut flower farm now. And that's not something, we don't have very many commercial scouts for ornamentals in the state at all. So the fact that this one cut flower farm said, we need somebody from outside, we're too busy, you know, we're too busy doing other things. We need somebody from outside to actually, we'll pay you to come in and scout for it. So, but yeah, I do think so. So good, thank you.
I wonder if there's opportunities for attractive plants to get pests attracted.
Oh, trap crops?
Trap, that's exactly my brain. Yeah, trap crops.
They are attractive, but well, hopefully you want them to be attractive. So radishes for flea beetles is the one that we actually, that you can use. And one reason you use radishes is flea beetles like them better than some of the ornamentals, but they also, the seed's cheap, they grow fast.
Yeah.
You can put in a row of radishes, attract the flea beetles. And then you need to do something there. You need to either capture them, which is, you know, they do actually occasionally vacuum them, or treat them with a pesticide on the trap crop so that you're not letting them go back out into the crop. Yeah. So yeah, there is. Yeah.
Do you know what proportion of production is perennial plants, or is there like interest in developing that for the ecological services, or are people, is it mostly annuals and sort of sticking that way?
I think there's a lot of people who are doing both, and I think people start with annuals. This is mostly anecdotal, but then they often will start putting in some perennials. I mean, peonies is a good example because peonies are really popular. They're early, they're gorgeous. You know, you can sell a lot of peonies if you can grow them. And so, and then the next thing that people move into in terms of perennials is starting putting some woodies in. So they've got them for foliage, or they've got them for larger scale events where you need big branches. There's actually somebody from Cornell who's an ag economist who's now down in Maryland, and their production is at Wenfei Uva, and their production is almost entirely woodies. And so
And mostly dormant.
some dormant, but some,
Could be wrong,
I think they do both, but they'll do, yeah, dormant branches as well. Yep. So it is, you know, I think again, when people start out, it's easy to start with annuals because that's kind of the way they've been thinking, but then starting to add in the other things. And even the concept that if you're going to put in perennials, if it's something like a peony, making sure that you have a plan for renovating them or renewing them as you go along. You look like you were going to ask.
Yeah, so one of the things that's striking is this diversity of species.
Mhm.
And then I was working alongside of Chris out there with the high tiles. There's this whole other component of genotype environment interaction. Like these things just respond so differently, same genotype based on how when they were seeded or
Mhm.
what they're exposed to, whether in a high tunnel or outside a high tunnel. So is there any group that's thinking like strategically about what are priorities and narrowing things down to focus areas? 'Cause
Not
right
that
now, it just seems like it's just
not that I know of. And it
yeah.
sometimes in terms of research or just in terms of understanding that. I think both are not very well known. And so, yes, so when you're looking, especially when you're looking at repeated plantings of things, it's not the same each time, even in terms of how long it takes you to get a flower and what the plants necessarily look like. So there's that piece from the grower side. But then there's also, as far as I can tell, the research often is more based on like what's popular, or what you're getting questions on. So there's lots of questions. So there's some on lavender, because lavender, lots of people want to grow lavender. It's a nasty plant to grow. I mean, if you're in a place where you can grow it, it's not a nasty plant. It's a lovely plant, but it's very picky. So if you've got a place you can grow it, it's great. And so again, we have people go and say, well, look, you just put that lavender out and then we're all set. But their soil is different, and so it doesn't work. So that gets a certain amount of work done on it. But it doesn't, I have not seen, even in this group that we're just kind of getting going, there's a little bit more discussion of, okay, should we write a grant together and what should be on? But overall, I haven't seen much of that saying, okay, let's actually look at these crops in enough depth to have that information to be able to say, here's kind of a fact sheet, cookbook, whatever, that says, okay, if you're growing this, and I think there probably are some, and a lot of them are, if they are out there, they're actually probably created by growers. Here's how you do sequential growth of this particular species. But then you get different varieties, and the varieties change all the time, and they don't always necessarily act the same. And color is this big issue of, so Carla was doing a talk, and she showed some of the queen lime zinnias, which are this sort of interesting combination of pink and green and peach and salmon and green and chartreuse green. And then also some lysianthus that are sort of dusty brownish pink, which if you look at them en masse look dead to me, but mixed in with a bouquet, they're very popular. Their colors are very popular, but mixed in a bouquet, I think. So, and that's the other thing, is they're trying to keep up with an annual. It's easier with perennials. Like, how do you keep up with what the next thing is always? Let's see if there's anybody else. Any other questions from, Thomas, you have your hand up.
Yeah, we got a question for you. It's basically how do things work around here? And for how much the college invests or cooperative extension invests in a particular industry, how that gets decided when you notify something or notice a new opportunity. And I think that applies to everybody who's not in like dairy or corn or soybeans. You've described a very organic process where you find that there's a need and find that there are other people who can help in various parts of serving that industry. And then you get some money and resources, and if it has legs, it keeps growing. Have you found that there's other parts to the system that are helping determine how much should be invested in a new agricultural sector like this?
I have not. I'm not sure I've asked. It's
Maybe that's important.
Yeah. I don't know if I even know who to ask, but and so again, I think sometimes it takes a little bit of information gathering. I know I'm looking at your picture there. A little bit of information gathering and then putting it together and kind of presenting it to say, we could use more help here, or what else can we do with this? Or don't you think it'd be nice to have somebody doing it? Whether or not that will fly at a university, I don't know. And then there's also more other universities and colleges than Cornell. So someone else may pick it up and run with it too. So I don't have a really good answer for that.
No, but thanks for the look under the hood.
You're welcome.
Moving along.
Is most of the variety development done by like private companies, or is there a lot in like public land-grant institutions?
I would say the great majority is at seed companies.
Okay.
It's not that there's none anywhere else. And And then there's some that's done by private individuals for certain for certain species. There's some that people are actually, some cut flower growers are doing themselves, but also other people that are interested are doing. I'm glad to see Bill's nodding his head.
Well, and some are ancient cultivars,
Yeah.
you know, peonies, some of those peonies have been around forever.
Right.
We have at Cornell, Mark Ridgen has bred 3 or 4 varieties. of
Yep, Alstroemeria.
And I think those are the first ornamental plants patented by Cornell, right?
They could well be.
Yeah.
And now
I've seen
it'd be
other
interesting
crops
to
a lot.
promote those to cut flower growers. And I don't know whether if they're aimed at garden varieties, so their stems are not long enough.
They're long enough.
They're long enough.
Yeah, bluegrass lane, they're long.
Were there some in Mint's garden?
I have no idea. There were some, I don't know.
Might
But
have
they're 2.5, approaching 3 feet.
And sometimes
which is long enough.
it's getting the word out. And like, where do people go looking for their seed, usually seed, but also plugs? So they don't grow it off direct from seeding. And so some of it's like, okay, how do you get that connection between the breeder, the producer, and the grower? And so sometimes, again, you do it backwards, so you get the grower interested and get them to ask the suppliers.
Any
Wow.
other questions?
Thank you for the question. I always like questions more than the talking. Anybody else here who has anything? Thank you.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.